Hello there, interwebs. I hope you're all doing well, and I'm hanging out here by my wall of way too many video games. And don't worry, I've been collecting these video games, since I was a little kid. Like, I have not gotten rid of any of them, so I have way too many. Way too many. Even have my Star Trek Elite Force ones way down there at the bottom. But anyways, the reason I am hanging out down here by my video games is I actually want to talk to you really quickly about something that I don't see a lot of people talking about surrounding the recent episode of The Last of Us, episode 3. They got everyone crying and really sad and just feeling so affirmed and joyful because it centered around the wonderful depiction of a gay couple who gets to live a full life within this post-apocalyptic world. I'm sure I don't have to tell you, I've reviewed it over on my main channel with Aaron. We had a really wonderful conversation that had us both crying as well during it about how much we loved this episode. And by the time this video releases, the episode 4 will probably be up because it's airing tonight, and I'm going to do my review tonight, so I'm probably going to edit this afterwards. But anywho, there have been numerous discussions about why this episode hit so hard for so many people, and I think there are numerous reasons why. It is a very well-written episode. It shows the full arc of a relationship that feels very truthful and honest. Like, there's sort of things where Nick Offerman's character Bill doesn't look pityingly upon his love Frank when his love is sick. There's not the sense of like, oh, I'm gonna look at you pity. There's still love there and joy there, which is something you do see in real relationships. And there's numerous other things, and it was just really great to see the arc of a decades long relationship, and it was just really affirming within all of that, and that's why a lot of people cried about it. But one thing that I think a lot of queer people like myself really resonated with the piece for, that I don't see a lot of people discussing, though I'm sure many people will as this episode gets analyzed more and more over the coming weeks, months, years, and that is the fact that the storyline that we get to see with these two gay men is not traumatic. It is tragic. In a lot of ways, it is a very, very tragic story. They sort of have to meet during the apocalypse. There's horrible things going on around them. They sort of have to live in this sort of horrible world. The story ends with them dying together. And in a way, there is sort of a Shakespearean tragedy feeling to that. Now, I'm sure there's people who will nitpick my definition of that word. That's totally fine. But I do find there's a little bit of tragedy in that. But one thing that episode is most definitely not is traumatic. And that is deeply surprising for a show set in a post-apocalyptic world, especially one like The Last of Us, which in both its video game form and in the episodes that we've seen so far of the show is defined a lot by trauma. Characters have so much trauma within this world, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, damn, just Trauma Land 2.0. I don't know where I'm going with that. But anyways, just a lot of trauma within that show. It's in many ways a story about how trauma creates cycles of more trauma. But for queer people, it's more shocking for us because gay stories, queer stories generally, are almost always defined by trauma. Go back and look at the stories of gay people for the past few decades within our mainstream media, and you will find the stories of people who have had storylines that were bury your gays, where one or both of a couple get to see the other die, and it's really sad and tragic and painful. I could literally probably name any TV show, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The 100. Hell, even the version of Bill and Frank's story in the video game version of The Last of Us is defined by a bury your gays traumatic-filled storyline. You know, I could go on and on and on about TV shows and movies that have buried their gays over and over and over again. But even beyond that, many more stories about queer people are about, like, how we're oppressed in societies. You know, you see things like Boys Don't Cry or Brokeback Mountain or all these other things about how queer people have to tamp down themselves or harmed by society, and there's this very pitying look that the camera and the gaze, the movie gaze, has upon queer people. It's always defined by trauma, and that can go all the way back to the Hays Code with Hollywood and how queer people had to be punished within media for being gay. There's a whole history of it that I'm not going to go into here. And what made The Last of Us so emotionally resonant for queer people specifically, is that it was a mainstream story that did not have trauma. These characters dealt with hard stuff. They dealt with painful things. The relationship was not perfect, and it did end, in my words, tragically. But it was not traumatic. It was not painful. And for queer people to see that is a really beautiful thing, because it tells us we can live a life free from trauma. Sadly, it may have to be in a world where quite literally the systems that oppress us no longer exist anymore, or at least exist far away, separate from us. We get to live in a world free from government and societal impressions upon our identities as LGBTQ people, which is sort of a sad statement about the capitalist and sadly growing authoritarian world that we live in right now, neoliberal world that we live in right now. But it shows us that, sans all of that stuff, sans all the ways that we try to discriminate against each other and sort of try to put each other into boxes, we could live a very trauma-free life. We could live a very happy life together. We could live a life of love and kindness and caring with each other. And I think that really resonated the hell with me. It's something that I know. I'm very much a take down the system type person that sort of oppresses us all. That's very much who I am politically. But getting to see that in art, it means a lot. It's why art is so powerful, because it lets us envision, see, imagine things that we may logistically know, but don't feel often enough because we aren't allowed to feel it, experience it. And it also allows other people to humanize us. But, for me, the reason that was so powerful as a queer person watching that episode was I got to see the life that it is very much possible for me to live with someone that I love, in a way that I very often don't get to see or envision in our world today. It makes me, this is a selfish thing. I'll be very honest about that, but it makes me want to see that for trans characters in a big media property. Maybe one day I'll get to make it. Maybe my Star Trek show that I'll get to make one day, hopefully Alex Kurtzman call me up, will be that. But even just seeing two gay cis men get to do that in a way that we don't really ever get to see two gay cis men get to exist still meant a lot to me as a trans woman, and I know to a lot of queer people. Also, Nick Offerman killed it. So yeah, so that's just why I wanted to quick talk to you about it.